Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very early good morning from London and good morning to everyone in Bahrain. And a very good day, whatever of this is left, wherever you are dialing into this amazing conference organized by Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institution in association with the Islamic Development Bank Group. Welcome to second day and the first session of the second day, which is on strategies for recovery from the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic, of course, with respect to Islamic banking and finance. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the humanity in the most comprehensive way, so as no one is unscathed by it, directly or indirectly. Having said that, many industry observers have started talking about a post-COVID era. And they have started suggesting adjustments in the government policy, reactions by the businesses in the corporate sector, and of course, certain new things are being suggested for the social sector and philanthropy in the context of Islamic banking and finance. And people have started talking about a new normal era, which is expected to emerge from this very bad pandemic, which in fact is not going away. With the successive emergence of new variants, all of us are still very nervous, and talking about a post-COVID era for many people seems like a dream. What is post-COVID era? It signals the epoch that arises from the global health and socio-economic crisis of the COVID-19 that has accelerated the developments towards the fourth industrial revolution. If we consider the end of 2019 as the start of COVID-19 pandemic, it may not be entirely too optimistic to assume that the start of 2022 will be a pre-dawn of the post-COVID era. Nearly 2 years of the pandemic have certainly changed the way we live on this planet. The post-COVID-19 era would carry the legacy of the pandemic for many years to come. In this session, our focus would be on the post-COVID era, how Islamic finance can react to this global experience for itself to adjust and of course prosper and progress more in the years to come, not only for the growth of the industry, but for the betterment of all the stakeholders involved in the industry. We have an amazing panel today, this morning, who would be sharing their thoughts on the topic. All of them are very experienced professionals in the field of Islamic banking and finance, with decades of individual involvement in leadership roles in the industry, in different organizations, in different countries, and in different contexts. Given that all of them, they're very well known, I would not be reading out their resume. However, I would like to introduce them in the most concise way. Our first panelist is His Excellency, Mr. Ayman Sajini, who is currently serving as the CEO of Islamic Corporation for Development in the private sector of the member countries of Islamic Development Bank. It is an organization which is a member of the Islamic Development Bank. Secondly, we have Mr. Muhammad Khatib, a very good friend of mine, who would be sharing his thoughts, especially with reference to technology, an area he has championed over the last quite a few decades. Hafiz Muhammad Yunus will be joining us from Lahore. He is a member of PIMCC, AAOIFI, and a former president of Institute of Chartered Accountants in Pakistan. And last but not least, all of us, we know Mr. Noor Abid, whose services to the Islamic banking and finance industry are immense. He has played an instrumental role in Islamic banking and finance, not only in Bahrain, where he is principally located, but all over the world. So as the name suggests, our panelists, they are very well experienced, very well known, and I'm sure they have a lot to share with us on the topic related with strategies for recovery from the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, Islamic banking and finance industry is about a $3 trillion industry. These are our estimates for this year. Our Global Islamic Finance Report, which we launched earlier this year, the end of 2021 estimates for the size of the industry were $2.941 trillion. Since then, the industry has surpassed the magic figure of $3 trillion. And this is despite the advent of pandemic and its effects globally. And we hope, and this is our sincere expectation, that the industry would continue to grow. In the post-COVID era, of course, a lot of adjustments would be required to make at an individual level, institutional level, industry level, and of course, in a national context, wherever Islamic banking and finance is of any significance. I have already referred to post-COVID many times in this introductory remark, but the question arises, are we really into the post-COVID era, or we are just talking about hoping that this post-COVID era would emerge soon? With this simple but very deep question, I would like to go first to my first panelist, His Excellency, Mr. Ayman Sajini. Mr. Sajini, Assalamu alaikum. I hope the technology is not going to let us down. Okay, I think there is some kind of delay. I would like to actually ask. Hello? Yeah.
Yeah, I think they unmuted me now.
All right, you are unmuted now. Ahlan wa sahlan
Yes.
wa marhaba.
Ahlan, sahlan. How are you? Inshallah, everything is good?
Alhamdulillah, everything is fine.
Alhamdulillah, wa shukra lillah.
So I actually asked you,
yes.
Is this pandemic really over? Are we already into the post-COVID era, or these variants of different sorts are reminding us that the monster is still here?
Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, was-salatu was-salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad. First of all, I would say the dua that inshallah God lifts off this pandemic from the whole world and really gets us back to our normality. Nevertheless, for this time being, the fresh outbreak in COVID-19 caused by the different variants is reversing this transition toward the normalities that we'd like to see. Coupled with unequal access to vaccines and slow vaccine rollout in some parts of the world, it is hard to say that the pandemic is over. So the realistic conclusion is that we have to continue facing it with important scenarios. In any scenario, banking executives must prepare for the next normal, to be very different from that of the past 10 years. For the financial institutions, I believe we have learned to be more agile, to adapt to the evolving pandemic situation and uncertain it brings. This means having to be more technologically savvy and digital responsive to the changing consumer behavior and demands. In addition, many banks will find that they need to improve their health, starting with rebuilding at least part of their capital buffer. Not only does the buffer provide resilience, as the COVID-19 crisis is proving, but markets have become increasingly aware of the importance of the capital cushion to withstanding the external shocks. Banks might reduce exposure to non-core activities that absorb considerable capital. For example, exiting some of these businesses. We as the Islamic Development Bank Group and ICD specifically have always been building our resilience, which means making sure our operations are aligned with ESG themes and the overall global development agenda. So that's my point of view.
Excellent, very good introductory remarks. We are looking forward to listen to you during this session. Before I go to Mr. Noorabid, I would like to ask my friend Muhammad Khatib. You are already in Bahrain and you make me jealous. I wanted to come to Bahrain, but because of certain restrictions, I couldn't. Apparently, your traveling around is suggesting that you have already started assuming that the pandemic is over. What are your personal thoughts about the longevity of this pandemic, and what do you think when the post-COVID era would actually start?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to participate in this great conference. It's always great also to be physically present in the conference and see some great old friends in person and on the screen. When we look at COVID-19, I believe it changed a lot of things in our lives. The best description that I heard, and I'm going to focus from the technology point of view on this, the best description I heard of COVID-19, it's the best CIO ever existed, because actually what it has done, it accelerated the changes that were supposed to take years. And I'll give you a very small story, if you allow me. I believe I was in a conference in 2013 in Abu Dhabi, I believe. And one of the major research companies came to me and asked me, what do you see changes in the banking sector in 5 years? And they were pushing their thoughts that in 5 years, everybody will be on the cloud. And they were asking specifically about our region, that all the banks will be on the cloud. And the person, the researcher, wanted to put a report on the importance of the cloud and how all the banks in 5 years will be on the cloud. And I remembered something that Bill Gates said long time ago, when he said that people always over-exaggerate what happens in 1 year and underestimate the changes that happens in 10 years. And based on that, I felt that in 5 years, this conservative industry will not really change that much. And he actually didn't like my answer. So 2013, take 5 years, 2018, actually no banks in our region put all their core banking and everything on the cloud. So he was off. But then, and I believe if it wasn't for COVID-19, probably a lot of the industry would have still taken years to move. Then we got hit with this abnormal, amazing phenomena called COVID. And the whole industry, I was getting calls at the middle of the night. A lot of banks did not have the infrastructure. They were not ready. They didn't know really how to handle, because all of a sudden overnight, all their customers are sitting home. They want to do banking and they want to do work at home. And that was definitely a tremendous change for our industry, a huge push. And what happened after that for the next 18 to 2 months to 2 years was amazing, because really our industry changed tremendously, and it became a force that forced a lot of banks to think about their digital transformation, their digital channels, how the life after the COVID-19 will be. Of course, now we have the new normal, and all the companies have different strategies how to deal with it and to work with it. And we see some success stories. We see some not so much of a success stories, where basically some customers struggled, some banks struggled with their customers. But I do believe it will be a tremendous change in the way the industry is, and it is not well. It is a tremendous way that how the industry deals. And hopefully we'll talk about later on about how the fintechs and other forces, which actually started more than 10 to 12 years ago, change this move and change this industry forever. So this is like the introduction that I would like to do.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm very happy that we have started on an optimistic note. Brother Ayman Sajini suggested that a new role for Zakat and Waqf institutions is being recognized in the wake of COVID-19. This is something a lot of Islamic economists were emphasizing for a number of decades, but somehow this was not being paid attention. So the COVID-19 has brought this importance to the fore. And Muhammad Khatib, you have also started with a positive note that the technology adoption has been accelerated by this pandemic. A number of things which would have taken years to get implemented, they have been now implemented in a very short span of time. We would come back to you this statement you mentioned about over-exaggeration of the things happening in the short run and underestimation of the phenomena in the long run. As an economist, and I would like to go into some of the details maybe later on, as Lord Keynes suggested that in the long run, all of us are dead. With this positive note, I would like to go to arguably the most experienced industry professional in Islamic banking and finance, Mr. Noor Abid, to kindly request him to share with us what kind of opportunities are there for Islamic banking and finance and the institutions therein to seize in the wake of this new normal, which has in many ways, in many countries already emerged. Mr. Noor Abid.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala Rasulihil Kareem. Thank you, Dr. Amayo. Thank you for your kind introduction. Let me start by saying that whilst I agree with my fellow panelists in two things. One, that the pandemic is definitely not over. Various variants are still roaming around the world, and God knows where it's going to end. And secondly, the technological change that was coming has been moved much faster by this pandemic than I think it would have done in any other circumstances. So with that, I don't think there's any new normal. It will not be new normal until the pandemic is behind us and we really get into a situation we have a clear way ahead. We're not there yet, but within what has happened in the last 2 years, there have been tremendous opportunities. And you will see when the results get announced in the first quarter of 2022, that those financial institutions, especially Islamic financial institutions that recognized this dynamic change that pandemic has brought around, will benefit and will announce better results. And those who chose to ignore this and sat on their laurels and said that, okay, let's see, wait and see what happens, and then we'll decide on what we want to do, would continue to show poor results. So with that, let me just share with you a few opportunities that I think the Islamic financial institutions should seize in the current circumstances. First and foremost, the consumer stickiness is gone. There is no such thing as customer loyalty that used to exist for the major banks and big names. That's gone. Existing customers are very receptive to switching banks in favor of mobile-first solutions. And mobile-first solutions means a change in technology that the bank has and change in technology that the consumer has. This will favor smaller and Islamic banks against incumbents. So I think this is the big opportunity for Islamic financial institutions to reinvest their business model, make incremental changes in the technology. The doing what they were used to do is no longer really possible. They can do this, but they will do so at their peril. I think becoming a digital platform is necessary. It is essential. I don't think anybody has a choice. I think this has to happen. And without that, I'm sorry, I will. This telephone's there, ringing somewhere. Sorry about that. I don't think that not doing anything is a possibility anymore. And I'll give you two examples, Nokia and Kodak, who ignored the technology change, and we all know what happened to them. So recognize that technological change has happened. The consumers have moved from using online services from 20% to more than 70%. And that's a change that we need to use to the benefit of our Islamic financial institutions. Secondly, we are now getting a highly young population who are set to enter banking markets across Islamic banks markets. And they will only do business with mobile-first banks. So what can the bank do? Look beyond fancy apps to focus on consumer experience. Build connected ecosystems. Younger population will see through fancy apps, to assess quality of product and uniqueness of the experience that the bank is offering. So please focus on that. Thirdly, a dominant majority of existing banking customers are shifting part of their banking relationships to non-banking businesses. And this is very important. You heard that in the keynote speeches yesterday as well. For example, payment solutions by likes of STC Pay, Kareem, Talabat, and others are increasing sharply. This is at the expense of traditional banks' revenues. So we need to recognize this and act accordingly. Build collaboration with non-bank businesses that are extensively used and loved by the customers. That's the way to deal with this challenge. Fourthly, a huge proportion of unbanked, unhappily banked, and underbanked small and medium enterprises are set to become highly bankable. In my opinion, this is a fantastic opportunity. So banks should embrace open banking, build access to real-time and comprehensive data points to bring down the cost and risk of small and medium enterprises and their banking. Lastly, in new markets, including Europe and Africa, it is now viable to operate low-cost, mobile-only banks to service the Sharia-conscious markets. The traveling class is also on the rise. So what can the banks do? Organically build mobile-first banks for the new markets. Connect east, west, north, south, every which way you can. Stay with your customers as they travel and do business across markets. So in conclusion, I would say that really this pandemic, while it has damaged and has really changed the world in a way that has not been changed ever in the past, has also brought the opportunities that the Islamic financial institutions should seize and benefit and go forward, really marching positively and hoping for better results and better future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for very concise yet extremely useful information you kindly shared, Mr. Nurabid. It's the overwhelming message I got from your statement is the technology, mobile only banking, customer loyalty, which has become very mobile because of technology. Younger generations, they are more tech savvy, and financial inclusion, which technology has allowed. All these things, they have made technology the most relevant tool in banking and finance, and of course, Islamic banking and finance cannot be an exception. With this starting message from Mr. Nurabid, I would like to go back to Muhammad Khatib, our technology guru, to ask what Islamic banks, you have been dealing with a number of Islamic banks in various jurisdictions, how actually Islamic banks and other financial institutions have come up with a response to this from technology viewpoint. Are they adopting new technology solutions? And as you, as a technology provider, have you come up with some new technological solutions which could benefit the industry?
Thank you. I always don't like to differentiate when it comes to technology. I do not like to differentiate between Islamic banks and conventional banks, because I really believe that it's different types of banks. We have Islamic banks has always for the last 10, 15 years been very, very advanced in technology, just as advanced as some of the conventional banks. And there are some banks who have not been paying a lot of attention to technology, just like we have some conventional banks that have not. So when it comes to technology, it's almost an even ground, how to utilize the technology and actually be a leader in the usage. What we noticed in COVID-19, as I said before, is an acceleration. The plans have been always been there, and the direction of the industry has always been that as in 2015, when the World Economic Forum recognized that we are living in a revolution called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and all these technologies are changing the world. Absolutely, that was happening, and we were in the midst of that revolution. What happened with COVID-19 is it accelerated the execution of what needs to be done. So we had recognized this probably at least 15 years ago, and we have started investing heavily in technology and things like the omni-channel and the digitalization of the experience, the customer experience. And but not very many or many customers actually took these solutions and implemented them. The best banks were focusing on some mobile app or an internet banking, but in the back end, in the bank, it's still a lot of manual work and the processes were not digitalized. When COVID-19 hit, yes, the edge became even more important, and how the customers interact became so the banks who did not have these channels wanted to have them. Some banks had 5%, 10% usage of their customers using mobile. All of a sudden they want 100%. The problem is not really the application. They had the application. The problem is, do they have the infrastructure to actually help or serve 100% of their customers digitally? Does the country has the internet infrastructure? And a lot of our Islamic banks are actually operating in countries with not a great infrastructures when it comes to internet. So we found some countries actually struggling with the internet, and that is reflected on the experience of the customer with the bank. and actually we got blamed for it. The technology got blamed for it. Although it is a multiple layers of issues. Does the country have the right infrastructure? Does the bank has the right infrastructure? And do they have the right application to actually deliver that experience? So I would say that it's not a new class of solutions. I believe the solutions were always, they've been in the works, and they actually more and more advanced solutions were coming up and being enhanced. It is the speed and the acceleration of the utilization of these solutions that COVID-19 just put a huge thrust behind that acceleration, and it happened. And I do believe that Islamic bank, we have some amazing Islamic banks that I'm very proud of, and we're working with, that they are at the edge of advance in the digitalization. I mean, if you take, I will mention Bubiyan Bank in Kuwait. They have like probably the largest percentage of the youth on their bank, and I'm proud that they are our customer, and they understood the digital journey and the digital experience, and they started many years back before even COVID-19. So when COVID-19 hit, they were not really very surprised. But if you look at other banks where basically they thought that this is not really important, this is a nice to have for like 5% of the customers, but 95% of the customers will not utilize this mobile application. All of a sudden, the realities of COVID-19 hit them, and they had to really struggle, and we had a lot of sleepless nights and work to try to get those tools happening. So I do believe that we do have all type of Islamic banks when it comes to utilization technology. We have the advanced ones, and we have the not advanced ones. But now everybody's forced to actually act.
No, thank you very much. Brother Hafiz Muhammad Yusuf, I haven't forgotten you. I will come back to you in a few minutes. But before that, I would like to take this opportunity to bring back Brother Ayman. ICDs everywhere. You go to Suriname, you go to other parts of the world, you know, ICD's relevance is there in the form of being shareholders to a number of Islamic banks, small ones, as well as medium-sized ones, with small shareholding, and other Islamic financial institutions. You go to the CIS states, you know, you will find that ICD has actually invested in a number of Islamic banks and financial institutions. And my question is, you know, are you looking into putting a kind of pressure on these smaller banks to become tech savvy? Mr. Noor Abed mentioned that these smaller sized institutions, they have a bigger opportunity to capture. And maybe, you know, with your small shareholdings in a large number of Islamic banks and institutions, this is an opportunity for you to push for technology and get a lot of benefits in the form of increase in value.
Sure. Well, basically, ICD covers 55 member countries, and we have 119 financial institutions in our network, where we have lots of shareholding in most of them, and we provide them line of finance. At the same time, we do at all times have a good dialogue with the financial institutions and with the regulators in those countries to really help financial inclusion and make sure that we reach out to those institutions that need, or the individuals that need to get the financial services. Beside, of course, putting the pressure on revenue and the shrinking profitability in some cases, increase in regulations, but all of that is for the good. At the same time, we do actually always discuss about the digital capabilities and how fast they could move in lots of our member countries. In those countries where people think it's so primitive, it's actually the best and fastest way to have the financial technology be included much faster. In some locations, we have experienced the adaptation has been much more acceptable, even by the individuals. Now, I think some of the challenges that we are facing is an overall training on how people could use their mobiles in order for them to benefit out of the financial services. At the same time, we do recognize the huge percentage of the youth community in most of our member countries, mashallah, I have to say, is it helps financial technology and in lots of ways, digitalization of processes, even in governments, to go much faster, because the adaptation and the acceptance of those technologies have been much better and much more, as I say, flexible in taking it to the next stage. I do recognize that some institutions still didn't have enough wealth management products, for example, that we wish to have in some of our member countries. And we do wish to see some more, as I say, programs going on the ground to help communities to really understand what services they can benefit out of and really go forward. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much once again. We have actually, our conversation so far has revolved around technology. I'm not saying that this is not appropriate. Probably technology is the most relevant tool in the present times. However, let us divert a bit to look into some other problems faced by Islamic financial institutions. I have received quite a number of requests from my friends in different parts of the world who are running smaller Islamic financial institutions like Islamic microfinance providers and similar kind of outfits. During the pandemic, actually, they have been facing a lot of problems. Lockdown, nothing is coming back into the institutions. And there are so many other problems faced by such institutions. Now, my question to our brother Hafiz Muhammad Yusuf is, what kind of solutions we can come up with as an industry to help Islamic financial institutions which have been directly hit by the bad effects of the pandemic? Hafiz Muhammad Yusuf.
Thank you very much, Dr. Humayun Dar, and Assalamu alaikum, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. As all brother colleagues have already covered, world is passing through some most exceptional and extraordinary times. And all of us, perhaps we are in agreement that the COVID is not over yet, so every day we are seeing closures, bankruptcies, there is a lot of chaos, everywhere. And as you said, the smaller financial institutions, they are feeling all that trouble, we can compare them with the SMEs also, So, most of the governments, at the first place, they had announced certain bailouts, they were there to help them out. And then for the banking sector, there was some kind of backup, in the case of central banks, most of the central banks in different countries, they also had basically given some incentives, to the industry. But here, you are right, to that extent where we are dealing with the smaller financial institutions, the funding is the key issue, where, they are having all that problem, so, some of the area they have to work on, to find some other sources, they have to have kind of a backup of their relevant institutions, the governmental institutions, the other institutions, their stakeholders, their shareholders, they have to look into their business model, some of them, here in Pakistan, I am saying, they are having their mergers, sharing their resources, so all that is happening, but overall, this situation is so grim, so it would be kind of not that easy, to find all that practical solution from that angle that whereby one can say that they can immediately become viable, so they have to go through all that mechanism, So, some of the options, which they could pursue to raise equity, more lending, more resources, for their business model, and then they have to transform their business model into the real realities what we are facing. And the other panelists, as they are indicating, now digitalization is the key for everything kind of business. We are seeing that many businesses in the past, which were general business, like for example commodities business, but now right now, I'm buying most of this stuff online. So all those new companies are coming in. So that is perhaps one of the key area for the smaller Islamic financial institutions to look into that as well, to new avenues of what they can do, to survive and to sustain their business models.
Excellent. I was actually thinking, Islamic banks of different sizes, other institutions. Islamic Development Bank has already started a Sukuk program, which is a very dynamic program, but this is wider in its scope. Just to focus on the pandemic, there is probably a need to come up with a global Sukuk issuance for the very purpose of meeting the requirements of Islamic banks and financial institutions from around the world. To start with, it could be a 10 billion program, but it could definitely go to 20 billion or 30 billion. An institution like Islamic Development Bank, which is a AAA rated institution, can play a very important role. But some major governments in the Muslim world, and maybe from the Western world, they should be brought into the equation to offer that kind of help. Just focusing on the national governments, which many of which are already facing budgetary constraints, this may not be sufficient. Very briefly, Brother Ayman, because you are sitting there in the ISDB headquarters, you might want to share with us some of the thoughts in this respect, this global Sukuk issuance program for the benefit of Islamic banks and financial institutions.
Well, thank you very much. Definitely, debt capital markets is a great solution to explore for financial institution supports and making sure that they go through the right liquidity funding. And I think that is an interesting concept and program that can be thought of and can be explored. Definitely, we are open for great ideas like green sukuk, blue sukuks. So the support of having sukuks that is focused only on financial institution would be really excellent. But beside that, I'd like to remind everyone again for the basics. Of course, digitalization is very important and becoming the norm. Evaluation, stress testing, and credit quality is further becoming an important thought and role for stress testing with risk management. We do actually have global sustainable agendas on the social responsibility and investments. The ongoing COVID-19 outbreak has prompted financial institutions and business across the globe to pay greater attention to environment, social, and governance ESG. Risk build greater resilience. So having the funding for those financial institutions that focuses on ESG will make sure that we have sustainability and ensuring that we can go for a better future. But the standardization and of the full spectrum of sukuk from a fixed income like instrument to equity like instrument factoring could also be a requirement for regulators and sukuk issuance and investors. The standardization of includes both aspects of the sukuk sharia entrepreneurship and interpretation and legal documentation. When sukuk issuance become comparable with conventional instrument from a cost and effect perspective, they will find more prominent places of issuance and investment of books. So these are a combination of, I think, ideas and thoughts that I could shed light on in regards to this question.
Excellent. As if you were reading my mind, okay, I wanted to go next to the regulatory relevance in the post-COVID era. Mr. Noor Abed, you are a regulatory expert among so many other expertise you hold. Now, in the post-COVID era, whenever it starts, I remember you said that, no, it's the pandemic is not over. And I actually concur. My life has changed significantly because of the COVID. Thankfully, I haven't lost any relative directly because of this thing, but there's so many other people, unfortunately, they have been hit by it very directly. So this pandemic is still here. And some people, I was talking to a friend of mine and he said, officially, probably this is going to be 2025 when WHO would be announcing that the pandemic is over. So quite a few years when the COVID-19 and its variants would remain with us. But in the post-COVID era, to ensure that Islamic banking and finance remains sustainable and to ensure its stability, what kind of measures we can suggest at this point in time?
Thank you, Dr. Humayun. I think that's a very good and burning question in the current environment. And I think our audience will become sick of hearing mobile banking and digital platforms. But reality is we are in a new world. And in this new world where youth are in the majority in most countries, large portion of working populations and users of the financial institutions, we have no choice but to go for these strategies that provide online facilities and offer digital platforms and online bank opening accounts. It shocks me. Recently, I went into a sizable bank and where I've held account for years, and I said, can I make transfers online? And I was shocked. They said, no, not yet. We haven't offered it yet. And this is shocking because you've heard examples already that banks are absolutely killing who have gone forward in online banking and telephone banking. So I think the banks need to recognize which of their areas offer sustainable profitability. And sustainable profitability only comes where you have customers and you are engaging with them and you're interacting them and you're improving their experience. Customer experience now strategically, technologically, in every which way depends on use of technology. So I think banks need to recognize this and adopt strategies that will take them down the path of improving, enhancing online facilities and digital platforms. They should also identify other opportunities which are profitable, which give them profit going forward in the current environment. Rather than use the word new normal, I use the word current environment. So recognize what is offering you profit in the current environment, which are the sectors that have benefited from this pandemic and which have the opportunities for growth, and invest in those sectors, offer facilities to those sectors. You know, surprisingly, banks have shied away from lending to SMEs, small and medium enterprises, because the risk is high. Of course, it's high, but they are the bulk of the businesses in most markets. And they are the ones also who have suffered most. And within that sectors within those SMEs are sectors that offer tremendous opportunity going forward. So identify those sectors, work with them, engage with them, lend to them, offer them the opportunities to co-invest with you and go forward that way. And one very important point, and people would probably hate me for this, do not fall into the trap of downsizing. In my lifetime, and you can see my gray hair, I'm well past the retirement age, I have not seen any organization that has achieved the desired purpose by downsizing. You damage your reputation, you damage your customers, and of course, you damage your staff. So downsizing rarely works. I think reskill your workforce, identify growth opportunities, identify sectors, as I already said, which offer you opportunities in the current environment, and go for those sectors. And finally, but very importantly, engage with your staff and with your customers. Customer engagement and staff engagement is critical. And I think if people think that without doing this, they'll succeed, in my opinion, they will not. They need to identify this and work with this. Thank you very much, Dr. Dar.
Thank you once again. So basically, you know, if I try to extract the implications for regulation, then the regulators would have to play a more proactive role to ensure that Islamic banks we are referring to here, of course, other banks as well, they go into areas which can be identified as the most relevant one. SMEs, for example, you are right, Islamic banks, they have shied away from financing SMEs. However, there are some countries where SMEs have been a focus of policy, not only with the help of banks, but other non-bank financial institutions as well. And I think a country like Indonesia in this respect must be looked into. Given the geographical diversity of the country and, you know, hundreds of islands it comprises of, the OJK and other relevant bodies, they have come up with a very comprehensive framework to ensure that Islamic financial institutions like Baitul Mal wa Tamweel and microfinance institutions, rural banks, they actually contribute to this field. And again, okay, this is something coming from Mr. Noor Abid's earlier statements as well. You know, identify the smaller players, and the regulators should be actually coming up with policies and frameworks which should encourage the establishment of these smaller players, and smaller and locally domiciled. You know, maybe having a federal license is one thing, but giving licenses for certain districts and divisions within the banks or within the countries, that may help as well in dissemination of Islamic banking and finance in all the jurisdictions within a country. Now, with this one, we might go to a more explicit focus on zakat and waqf. In the introductory statement of Brother Ayman Sajini, he mentioned that now the role of zakat and waqf institutions has become more identifiable, and more importance is being put on it in the wake of this pandemic. And I have seen a lot of activity, especially when it comes to webinars and seminars. And of course, Islamic Development Bank Institute, ISDB Institute, has been coming up with some tremendous research on the relevance of social sector institutions for Islamic finance. Now, zakat and waqf, these are two institutions which can be used for bringing some kind of stabilization in the event of the external shocks like the current pandemic. So our brother Muhammad Yusuf, can you elaborate on the role of zakat and waqf in the context of Islamic banking and finance, how zakat and waqf can be used by Islamic banks, not just non-bank financial institutions, to promote the cause of Islamic finance and, of course, help the communities they are attempting to serve?
Thank you very much, Dr. Dar. You know, and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, the other day I was joking with Dr. Dar, being chairman of a panel, that you have chosen me to kind of comment on this, being Hafiz, you know, so I am Hafiz, but the fact of the matter is that I am not an Islamic scholar. But however, I would try to cover up the aspects of financial and economic implications, you know. So as we all are aware of that fact that zakah and waqf, they have been in place, you know, since the inception of Islam, and zakat is among the 5 pillars of Islam, you know. So essentially, I mean, that beautiful virtue is there. I mean, to and poor, I mean, to overcome, their whatever, and then later on, you know, it may be utilized as a tool to kind of, you know, to create some poverty alleviation, you know. So it's there. And Waqf is also there, you know, since the very inception, you know, and that is continuing. Now, if I could see that, as I said earlier, I mean, we are passing through some very, very exceptional and difficult times, which all of us, we never thought of, you know, that they would be happening in our lifetime, you know. So, I mean, when the pandemic erupted, you know, so I would say, I mean, in most of the countries, I mean, not only the regulators, the governments, you know, I mean, they were having their bailout packages, but sharing with you Pakistan experience, and I'm sure, you know, that was happening elsewhere. So the community as a whole, I mean, people who were well off, you know, I mean, they came forward, you know, so because there were lockdowns, you know, and millions of people, and they were on streets, I mean, they were without jobs, I mean, because of the lockdowns. Country like us in Pakistan, we are having a population of 220 million, you know, so you can well imagine the daily wages kind of numbers, stuff like that. But the society responded, I must say, very well, you know. So, I mean, during the first 6-8 months, you know, I mean, when the severity of the pandemic was very, very high, I mean, so, I mean, people, they came forward, you know, individually, family, society, institutions, you know, everybody, you know. So, I mean, we had passed the first real shock of that, you know, so, I mean, that was there. So now point is that, you know, zakat has been there, but at the same time, fact of the matter is that, you know, I mean, majority of the Muslim population, you know, I mean, they are not very rich, you know, I mean, if I would quote the example of subcontinent Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, and where almost half of the Muslim population lives, you know. So I mean, zakat has always been instrumental to address the food, health, and shelter issues, you know, and in some of the cases in the recent years, many people had donated, I mean, their funds, zakat funds, to educational institution also, I mean, to feel that, you know, I mean, that is the area. Because without education, I mean, you cannot do the poverty alleviation, you know. So, I mean, we have seen so many examples where now, I mean, many institutions, they are being run with the zakat funds, and now they are creating all that assistance, you know, and in fact, I was part of one of the institution which was kind of providing free education to over 300 poor students, you know, and now those students, they have reached to the level of becoming engineers, doctors, stuff like that, you know. So I mean, so all those examples, I'm sure in every country they are there. But now, as I said, the time we are living in, very difficult, where we have seen many of the lower middle class people, you know, I mean, they have gone down, you know. So now the number of people who need the help, you know, have grown tremendously, you know. I mean, so I mean, that's where, I mean, the issue is, I mean, the pandemic is continuing. I would say, I mean, we have seen the new now, in next 2-3 months, you know, we would get all those sensitivities, you know, and also factor that the real shocks, you know, the real aftermath, the real consequences are not yet known, you know. So essentially, both the areas of zakat and waqf, you know, from the Islamic point of angle, you know, I mean, we all in exceptional circumstances, you know, so all rich people, all rich institutions, you know, the Islamic development, the governments, you know, I mean, OIC maybe, I mean, they have to deliberate on that, and they have to create some funds to increase the pie of both of zakah and waqf. In fact, I mean, there are few countries who are very rich, you know, in the Islamic world, you know, I mean, and I believe they are having zakat surplus, and at the same time, many countries, I mean, they are zakat deficit. So there are to be some coordination, you know, through some forum, I mean, to coordinate that, and zakat should be routed to the countries, I mean, where there is a great need at this moment of time. I mean, that is very, very kind of difficult. So certainly, I would say that, I mean, these are the two beautiful tools of our society. I mean, zakat is in any case mandatory, I mean, to share our wealth, you know, people who are wealthy and who are having to share, I mean, with the poor and needy. I mean, that responsibility and obligation. On the waqf side, you know, I mean, Islamic society in the past has, I mean, great philanthropy, and people have been contributing, institutions have been contributing, you know. But there, I mean, some collective effort, you know, some institutional effort, some government effort, you know, I mean, they are to be kind of, you know, having great coordination, I mean, to move forward. And in this case, I would say that Islamic Development Bank perhaps can play major role, I mean, to create all that situation, and then on top of that, the Islamic banking, wherever they are, Islamic financial institutions, also they have to create their own kind of coordinating body in the respective countries, I mean, because the time we are living, none of the institution, can move alone, so so both these tools are very tool, and if they would be institutionalized properly, with the help of the Islamic Development Bank, with the help of the respective governments of the countries, and also of the OIC, and all these entities, work together. So inshallah, we would be able to find, we would be able to happily and successfully survive in this difficult time, Dr. Dar.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Dar, I would like to comment on this, if I may, if you allow me, please.
Please, this is really good. This should be conversational. So we'll be very happy if you could come up with your input as well.
Thank you very much. From my auditing days, I know for a fact that in the Islamic world, Islamic countries, there are waqf funds that run into multi-billion dollars each fund, not collectively, individually. This is really, in the current environment, fantastic opportunity for the Islamic institutions to work with these waqf funds, particularly Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, but even Bahrain has sizable waqf funds, and arrange for this to be invested jointly with the Islamic financial institutions into real economy, productive SME projects. Banks will benefit, Waqf will benefit, and the Muslim Ummah will benefit. Everybody benefits from this. And I think this is a fantastic opportunity that should not be missed. Thank you for allowing me.
Thank you very much. Actually, Islamic Development Banking is an institution which is not sufficiently appreciated by the Muslims. Awqaf Properties Fund. This is a fund which is set up by Islamic Development Bank, and it has done a number of very interesting projects. In the post-COVID era, we have to look into the examples of best practices around the world where the institution of Waqf has played a very important role. I keep on giving the example of Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad's current headquarters. This is built on a Waqf land in a very interesting structure, which allowed the Waqf to give lease to Bank Islam for, I think, a period of 23 years, develop this 35 stories building. And after 23 years, this will go back to the Waqf. So in this process, an asset has been created, which would be of a lot of greater use for the Waqf, which owned the land. Now, when we look at cities like Karachi, for example, in the heart of the city, Chundrigarh Road, you find some pieces of land which are empty, and this is the prime property. If a Waqf private sector partnership can be devised in such a way that these properties are developed into commercial properties for the benefit of the Waqf, that could be a wonderful thing to do. Now, I would actually like to assure myself and you that we are not talking to each other only. There are a number of people from around the world, they're watching us. And I'm so happy to see this one question coming from Gambia. Gambia is a small country surrounded by Senegal, and not very many of us would know a lot of things about it. But this brother from Gambia, he says that Islamic finance is at a very rudimentary stage. In Gambia, there are a couple of Islamic microfinance institutions. No big player. Islamic banking is at a very, very initial stage. Now, I would like to take this opportunity, given that ICD has gone to the countries like Suriname and so many other small countries. Brother Abel, would you look into Gambia to see if we can help our brothers over there?
Definitely would love to explore it. And if there's a business plan, of course, or if it requires us to do the business plan and explore it, we look forward to it. We do serve our member countries in the way that we create and establish financial institutions from ground up. In some institutions we invested and then we support them. So it's more or less given developmental mandates from ourselves is to ensure that we reach out to the SMEs. As long as it goes into that direction, of course, in a Sharia compliant structure, we'll be happy to do so.
Excellent. No, thank you very much for this assurance. Now we have about 12 minutes to go. And I would like to check if there are any further questions from people. And there is one question written in Arabic, and I would not know what does it mean. Maybe the Secretariat would help me. But in the meantime, I would like to go to this final round of questions. Again, going back to Muhammad Khatib, you might have thought that I have forgotten you, but I can see you, okay, and you look wonderful. On the technology front, what are the opportunities? You know, if you can identify 2-3 opportunities for Islamic banks and financial institutions to look into those opportunities and benefit purely from technology viewpoint. So what is there, for example, in the West, which Islamic banks have not adopted, and there is now a need to come up with that kind of adoption?
Allow me to widen the answer a little bit than limiting it. I really do believe we live in extraordinary times, and we have extraordinary events happening in the last 15 years that sometimes we get lost in the noise and we're not really clear in what's happening in the world. The three things that I think on the national agenda in the Islamic countries we should be looking at, and this, of course, is going to trickle down to the Islamic finance. It's basically, the first one is we are going through a tremendous revolution. They call it the fourth industrial revolution, that actually changing the world socially, financially, economically, however you want to look at it. And I believe this only happened 4 times in the humankind history. And if our countries, as Islamic countries, do not realize that, and they have a national agenda to actually take advantage of that, and we have been slow in doing that, I think we are missing a tremendous opportunity. Then you have the sustainability initiatives around the world, where basically it's driven by the climate change, but also the social changes that's happening around the world, also driven by technology, is a tremendous change in our world. And the third thing that then comes the pandemic. And the pandemic is playing a factor. And what we do is you draw a picture where all those 3 intersect. And you will find some areas where we should really focus on the national agenda and on Islamic finance. Of course, Islamic finance plays an amazing role in the sustainability initiatives, especially on the social finance side. I believe Islamic finance is a tremendous tool to accelerate the SDGs when it comes to the social part of the SDGs. I actually look at the whole number of SDGs that the UN came with, and I can draw how social finance can actually address every single goal of them. So the spirit of Islamic finance actually works very well with the SDGs. pandemic, when we look at it, it's actually accelerating the move to a different world, which is the virtual world, the digital world, and how we integrate this digital world in our lives. It is a responsibility in the national agenda to actually create a digital economy, create a digital infrastructure, create a digital transformation of the country. And I wouldn't say heavily regulate the Islamic finance, but actually give the tools to those institutions to allow them to serve their customers and to provide a better world. And then for the Islamic finance or for the Islamic banking, we see the opportunity because of this change in the business model, the huge change in the business model. The fintechs are coming in and actually introducing a new business model that is focusing on certain services that traditionally the banks actually have done. And now, of course, a few years back, and I sat on many stages with you, and they were saying that the fintechs is a threat to banking and all that. And I always insisted that actually it's a complementary, and there's no way those two models can actually succeed independently or they can compete. And the only way they can succeed is if they work together in a complete ecosystem. So for the banks, I believe it's a huge opportunity for them to reach out to those fintechs and partner with these fintechs and provide much better services in this new ecosystem and this new world. Everything has to work together, and I really believe we live in a very unique times, and I hope that we don't miss the opportunity to actually capitalize in these amazing times.
All right, thank you very much. I have been reminded that we are now nearing the end of this session, not our end, inshallah. Now, let me actually go back. I will come up with one idea at the end, which I believe is a real opportunity, and no one has thought about it. But before that, Mr. Noor Abid, would you like to say a few words, concluding remarks on the session?
What I would say is that the Islamic financial institutions should continue to identify, explore, and enhance opportunities that the current environment offers them. And my request to the regulators would be that they should remain flexible, supportive, and be lenient on liquidity and other requirements until the banks are in a position where they can meet the regulatory requirements. They have been lenient and they have been supportive. All I'm asking is they should continue to do so. And I would also like to thank you and thank AAOIFI for giving me this opportunity to join this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brother Yusuf.
Yes, sir. 2 years back, I read a book, which is a bestseller, and many of you may have read that, written by Yuval Noah Harari, 21 Lessons for 21st Century. The book was written in 2016, and the crux of the entire theme was that, that this century would be dominated by artificial intelligence and biotech. That was happening. Technology was going at a fast pace, but now after since we have seen the pandemic, so the equation has totally changed, that is a huge opportunity, at the same time, big challenge also for the Islamic financial institutions, banks, the entire society of the countries, particularly countries like us, where education level otherwise was low, so not only, the existing system, they have to transform themselves into these new technologies. They have to transform their staff also, so that is the reality. And then end of the day, education. And to survive in this pandemic, that is the financial and economic part, but I would also say that cleanliness is half faith, is considered as half faith in our religion, So that would be the one, that message, to the entire community, is that they should immediately go for the vaccination, and they should have a clean environment, wear masks and everything, so that we should be able to survive. But my key message is the education level are to be enhanced, the transformation at the banks and the institutions, whatever we are there, right pointed out my brother colleague, Abbas Sahab, that don't do the downsizing, but you have to transform your staff, I mean. So in fact, the digital banking, the digital financial institution, I am part of one of the Islamic, one of the conventional bank, where we already had started digital banking, I mean, throughout, and no downsizing, Noor Abbas Sahab, so I mean that, I mean, we are living in exceptional times. Allah bless us all, and we should be able to sustain this, and we should be able to carry on, I mean, in this, whether it is a new norm, whether it is a current norm or whatever, Allah bless us all. We should complete our journey happily and successfully, I mean, before we go to Allah.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Ayman Sajini, your concluding remarks, please.
Well, thank you very much for AAOIFI again for having me on this panel, and it was a great discussion. I'm optimistic by nature, and I believe in مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا, and that's what God had promised us. And inshallah, we will see great things will come out of this time period that we see right now, challenging, but with all the great changes that are happening and the digitalization and the new way of doing business and how we are able to connect and have financial inclusion. I'm very optimistic that the future looks great, inshallah, and we will have a great experience, bismillah ta'ala, coming out of this. So inshallah, all of us will be well and stay safe.
Inshallah. Thank you very much. Before I thank all of you and AAOIFI and Islamic Development Bank for making sure that this conference takes place in a hybrid format, whereby we have dialed in from Saudi Arabia, from Pakistan, from United Kingdom, and elsewhere as well. I think, from my side, as chair of the session and as someone who has specialized in Islamic product innovation, I was actually looking at the screen. This week, the rolled up jackpot for Euro Millions lottery is 107 million euro. If someone wins, that person is going to get 107 million. I'm not advocating for a lottery. But what I am suggesting is that now that technology has become so relevant to us, can we, Islamic banks and financial institutions and the wider Islamic finance industry, come up with a collection, disbursement, and investment tool which should allow us to collect $125 million on a weekly basis from about 1.7 to 2 billion Muslims around the world. So a global product which should allow us to collect about $500 million US on a monthly basis. If we can come up with this kind of innovation, and I know that there is a solution, then we can mobilize a lot of resources available to us in a very efficient manner for the benefit of a lot of communities which are marginalized communities around the world. So we have to start thinking in terms of the leveraging of technology in the context of Islamic banking and finance. If this kind of products can be developed, I believe the future of Islamic banking and finance in the post-COVID era is very bright. With this one, I would like to thank all our panelists, Mr. Muhammad Khatib, Mr. Noor Abad, Mr. Muhammad Yusuf, and Dr. And His Excellency Ayman Sajini for being with us and sharing your thoughts. I believe that Muhammad Khatib, you want to say something?
Dr. Humayun, there are a couple of questions from the floor.
Okay, so there are quite a few questions. Okay, I'm not going to conclude. So let's see, okay, which questions are there. Would anyone like to read out those questions for me, please?
Hello, Humayun, this is Kabir Hassan from the floor.
All right.
In Bahrain. During this COVID, I take this as a laboratory for Islamic finance industry in general. Unfortunately, Islamic banking side of it, where the borrowers, they lost their business, they are not able to pay. So in Quranic principle, you're supposed to give them time. Instead of giving them time, they have created, or by force from the government, created they call compensation fund. And they are claiming that compensation fund belong to them. Or they're asking the government to come up with this money for the sake of greater macroeconomic sense. Do you think that that was the correct approach? We talk about Islamic social finance, you're very good in pitching what can be done, this and that. But this was the situation. I think we failed in many countries. I can give you the example from Bangladesh. I'm sure similar situation exists in other countries. I just want to hear your opinion from the distinguished panel. Thank you.
So basically, in the wake of the difficult situations, the users of Islamic financial services, they faced problems, and of course, moratorium, a number of programs were introduced by the regulators, and Islamic banks, okay, they were not an exception. May I ask Mr. Noor Abid to respond to this one, please?
Thank you. I think that's an excellent question. The reality is that in most countries, Islamic banks have been understanding of the situation where such problems have existed and have allowed customers to work with them. Problem arises when the customers refuse to do anything and just want the debt written off and the profit waived off, and that is not going to work. Islamic Sharia requirements want you to work together, and both parties have to work. And I think in most countries where I have worked with the Islamic banks, they have allowed their customers the time, space, and to come out with a workout solution that benefits both the customer as well as the bank. And obviously, this is a unique pandemic. We've not experienced it in our lifetime. And inshallah, we will not. And as my brother said, Yusra, inshallah, khair, going forward. But really, the situation that my brother has just described is real, but the two parties have to work together. No one alone is going to find a solution for this. The governments have been supportive, but the countries like Bangladesh, like Pakistan, like Indonesia, like Malaysia, don't have deep pockets to come up and meet the requirements of the Islamic financial institutions or the customer. So in a nutshell, the customer and the bank has to work together and come up with a solution that works and benefits both parties.
All right, I think, okay, this is a very adequate answer. The expectations towards Islamic banks were unrealistic. If, the kind of problem we are facing, if Islamic banks were asked to be very, very understanding, all these Islamic banks would have been wiped out. So the response, I think, from the regulators, from Islamic financial services industry has been very adequate given the circumstances. Rizwan, any other questions before we end the session?
Hanan, there's a question on the floor. Yes, we have one more.
All right, okay, we'll take this last question.
There are two actually. While the mic is it's coming, I've got a question from the audience virtually, and the question is related to Ethiopia in particular. And I'll read it out. The question, it says, the country has a huge potential for Islamic finance. However, it has been a recent phenomena, and we are struggling to benefit the people. Most of this important form of financing mechanism. We professionals in the field has established an association to promote the industry. How can IDB can assist in accelerating our moves? So I guess the question is to Mr. Ayman Sajeni.
Sure. Thank you very much. We in the Islamic Development Bank and in ICD in particular, we look forward for any application, and we will study the opportunity and evaluate it. And inshallah, we can be able to respond to it positively. That's putting it in short. Thank you.
Excellent. And I think that is relevant to a lot of countries from in the developing state. There's a comment from the Secretary General of AAOIFI, Brother Umar.
Thank you, Brother Rizwan, and thank you, Dr. Dar. I know that we are running short of time on this session, but I think, or to be honest, I loved the discussion today in this panel in particular. And we have touched upon one topic, but there is one thing which if you allow me a little bit, a longer comment on a lighter note. Sometime back, I was requested by the central bank to visit the Federal Revenue Authority along with the delegation of Islamic financial institutions for having the level playing field on the taxation side. And we said to them that you should help Islamic finance grow. They said, yes, we want you to grow so that you pay more tax. So let's take it on the other side now. We are seeing this Delta variant coming in, this Omicron coming in. The point is that I believe it's the right time for Islamic financial institutions in particular, and generalist finance industry also, to understand that they cannot earn from their customers if their customers are not able to be sustainable. And this goes to the whole economy and it goes to the whole world. You vaccinate your people, and from another country, from another part of the world where people are not vaccinated, a new variant will come in. Same applies to you, that you try to be more and more profitable, try to manage your profitabilities at this difficult time. Yes, this is a challenge, but then if you try to do it at the cost of others, this becomes a problem. Why I'm emphasizing on this one, I would like the respected panelists to touch upon very quickly on this point, that what could be the strategy to ensure, because now stimulus packages will be going out, there will be no more bailouts, we can understand now, or even if it is possible, the level will be very small. So the main question that I would like to put with this long remarks with apologies, is that what Islamic financial institutions need to do as a broader level strategy to make sure that they help sustain the economies so that eventually they are able to sustain themselves.
Anyone from the panel, and this is the last comment and question. This is 7:39 already, and I don't like the idea of going beyond the time. Anyone from the panel would like to answer?
I think very briefly, the answer lies in Islamic financial institutions investing in real economy and supporting the customers who are in dire needs. 1, 2, if really the situation is desperate, then bite the bullet, then make the hard decisions, because you cannot hold people to ransom and you cannot hold the economy in one state. So you have to bite the bullet and move forward. But really the answer lies in investing in real economy, getting the funds from all these massive work funds that I already mentioned earlier. And believe me, in Islamic countries, there's plenty of liquidity. You have to find ways of attracting it and then investing it and then looking after people the way that Brother Umar has described.
I think for me, okay, to end, there is a huge scope for Waqf-related products to be brought into Islamic banking and finance. And I believe cash Waqf-linked sukuk and similar instruments can play an important role here. In the post, whatever is happening now, we have all been hit by this pandemic. And in the beginning, we didn't know what to do. Okay,
I think it's very important to think about, banks as being banks. And let's be realistic here. Banks are bankable transactions. So let's put that as a segment. Let's put a segment where there's venture capital, there's private equity, there's Waqf, there is funds that are specifically for support, and there is different types of businesses. Let's differentiate that a little bit from each other and really have each of these organizations take their path and not really mish it up together. After all, banks are being regulated by regulators, and it's for a very good reason, because they're taking care of the business of banking and they're taking care of the business of bankable transactions. So if I'm a Waqf, I'll take care of the needy maybe in the Waqf or the target that the Waqf has created. And if it is actually to support certain type of businesses, and that would be its business. And I think if we make sure that each of these sections are taken care of professionally, would be good for the whole way of thinking. And it's maybe also better for managing expectations and maybe get out of the thought that banks should be doing everything and be supportive, be donator, and be and all that direction. I mean, they do have social responsibility and they have to support that, but there is a segment that needs to be understood. Regulated entities need to be functioning in a regulated manner and have to be focused to be stable for the good of Jama'ah. So, and that's basically what I think is a good conclusion for us to keep in mind.
Absolutely, I fully agree. Actually, the instruments and tools which could be brought into banking as a banking solutions, this is something we should be looking into. Otherwise, Islamic banking in most of the countries is only a fraction of the total banking sector. Most of Islamic banks, they're very small. Okay, look at Pakistan, 18% Islamic banking. In Bangladesh, about 25, 26%. And mostly the countries where Islamic banking has prospered, it's about 1/4 of the overall. Now, putting this huge pressure on Islamic banks, we are talking about destroying the whole industry.
Yeah.
That will not be our approach.
It's a very fast growing industry, though, as statistics have proven, which is a good sign.
Yeah,
that's right. However, implications should be taken from what we have experienced in these 2 years, so that Islamic banks and other financial institutions are in a better position to react and respond to this kind of calamities. With this, I would like to take once again this opportunity to thank everyone, all the panelists, AAOIFI for inviting me, and Islamic Development Bank for helping to organize this conference, and our participants from around the world for being patient and being with us and contributing to this. Thank you very much once again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you so much, all the respected panelists, Dr. Humayun Dar, for excellently chairing the session. It was an extremely beneficial session for me personally, and I'm sure for all the listeners joining us here physically as well as virtually. We've discussed a range of different topics, starting from technology, the social finance side, as well as the implication and the assistance that we can extend to the developing countries, primarily those that are affected by the COVID. So inshallah, we hope the discussions have led to some kind of thought-provoking ideas in which we can take back with us and continue to play our role in whichever organization, country we are in. So let me thank you, Professor Dr. Humayun Dar, for chairing this in an excellent manner. Thank you for waking up really early in the morning in London. I know it was 5 o'clock when I woke you up, so I do apologize for that. But thank you for your commitment. And for all other panelists, Mr. Noor Abid, thank you for joining us. Besides your busy schedule, I know you're traveling. Mr. Ayman Sajani, I know you're traveling as well, so we couldn't have you here, but inshallah we hope to have you here with us physically next time around. Mr. Hafid Yusuf Saab, thank you very much for joining us, our PIMC member. And Mr. Muhammad Khatib for joining us physically. I mean, I think you are a true warrior, beside all the travel restrictions, to join us here physically. We thank you. We thank Path Solutions for all the support it extends to AAOIFI. And as you move forward in your journey, we wish you all the best as well. So inshallah, we hope we can have all our speakers join us physically in future. So let me thank you all for being with us. Inshallah, we'll move to the next session. So thank you very much.